Today's video is going to be all about my solo trip and the main takeaways that I had from that trip. Now, in the previous video from last week, I talked about what a solo trip is and why I find it to be important. So I'd encourage you to go back and watch that video so that you can get a little bit more context, because I'm not going to give a lot of that here today. In this one, though, the takeaways that I got, because this trip was phenomenal. I'm Patrick Menefee, and I'm here to help you master your money, your mindset, and your mission in order to help you become the best possible version of yourself, because I believe that the world needs a lot more people who are the best version of themselves. Now, I'm going to first talk about the purpose of my solo trip, what I was trying to get out of it, what my intention was, and then I'm going to talk about the three different things that I really took away from this that were really powerful and are going to help me moving forward. The intent behind this trip was I wanted to, for Charlotte entrepreneurs and for my coaching business, I wanted to establish a clear 3-year vision for them. And I also wanted to create a 6-month roadmap that had very clear steps of where I was going. That was successful. I'll start there. The number one thing that I took away is that Charlotte Entrepreneurs is the leverage point that helps everything move forward faster. Now, by starting with simplicity that allowed me to create some clarity, I was able to zoom out and say, okay, this is the mission of each one of these. That was the very first thing that I did going into it was, why am I coaching? Why am I starting Charlotte Entrepreneurs? What can people expect to gain from both of them? And what I realized was by doing that, the mission was one and the same. I knew that they were linked, but I'd always looked at them as I'm going through my day-to-day. I'm always looking at them as either I'm working on Charlotte Entrepreneurs or I'm working on coaching. I know that they'll help each other and they'll be mutual beneficial, but I didn't quite know how closely interlaced they were. By doing this, by going on this trip and realizing and simplifying it to the deepest core of what these two things are, the fact that they're one and the same allows me to focus on Charlotte Entrepreneurs, which will then help more people in my coaching business and will help everything grow together. Created a lot of clarity in prioritization, which is number two. Number two is I walked away with enormous clarity on my prioritization and what events I was going to have in the next few months and what those events were going to look like. Part of the challenge of starting up something new like this, and I'm sure that plenty of you can relate if you've had ideas, is there's a bunch of ideas running around in your head. Now, the approach that I took this time it ended up being really, really, really good. Based on the idea from Cameron Herold in The Vivid Vision, where he talks about the mind map, I took pieces of paper from a notebook, and on one side, I would list the major event or the major thing that I wanted to do. So I had my networking events for Charlotte Entrepreneurs, I had my workshops, I had retreats, I had charitable events, I had fun events, I had masterminds, I had all of these major things that I wanted. And I'd throw them up on the wall. And then I would just brain dump the first couple of things that came to mind for each one and the ideas that I had for them. Now, a lot of times what happens is I'll sit there and I'll go through all of them and if I'm talking about the networking event, I just need to focus on the networking event. And now I'm just beating myself trying to figure out deep down in the weeds what all the things are that I want. In this case, I made it way easier. I just listed out all the things that I knew off the top of my head, and then I moved on to the next event. And I wrote down everything else on that next event and went on to the next one. By putting them up on the wall, now I was able to see what they all were. I could see how they interacted with each other. It was almost like in the movies where they've got detectives that are solving a case and they've got the lines all over the place, or there's the great meme from It's Always Sunny. That's basically what I did. And by throwing it all up on the wall, I was able to then put them in order of the way that it made the most sense for them to interact. And ultimately, I created a timeline. And by creating that timeline, I knew the sequence of events. I then knew where I needed to focus. And now I know that for this quarter, coming up into Q3, what are we coming into? Q3? Q4? Oh, shit, we're almost done with Q3. Wow. As I focus on the rest of Q3 and going into Q4, I know that my focus is the networking events and the workshops. And as I get those up and running, then I can start thinking about the next thing. But I don't need to spend any time thinking about the rest of that shit right now because that's not the priority. If I have ideas that come up for them, I put everything on the wall. I replicated that mind map on my wall in my office. And now if something comes up, I can go throw it on the wall. So those are the two biggest things that I took away. The third thing, this was more process oriented about solo trips that I will implement going forward. Intentionality creates so much success on this trip. I knew going in exactly what success looked like. Success looked like a vision plus a very clear roadmap over the next 6 months. And that is exactly what I walked away with. By setting that intention, I I knew all along that I needed to be checking in on myself. Am I getting closer to this? Am I running out of time? My trip started on a Monday afternoon and it ended at 11:30 or 11 o'clock when I had to check out of the Airbnb on Wednesday. So I only had an evening, a morning, and a full day. So as I go out and I'm doing different things and I'm grabbing lunch and I'm going hiking and all of that, I've just got in the back of my mind, I need to have this. I need to get back to work. I need to be thinking about this while I'm hiking. I need to be focusing during this period. And I know that, okay, as Tuesday is going on and I'm brainstorming more and more ideas, I can brainstorm through the end of Tuesday, but come Wednesday morning, I've got a few hours left and that's it. It is time to focus 100% on action steps and what I can do next. The beauty of this is by doing one of these every 6 months or so, the fact that I'm going to do one before the end of the year means all I have to do is focus on those events for this next quarter and a half. By doing that, I free myself up to then in December, reevaluate everything else, check in on the progress of these, think about where I want to go next with all the other ones and make sure that I'm still on track. But that intentionality helped create so much clarity and so much success as I went through this trip and as I went through the process of those 3 days. So that was my trip. Those are my big takeaways. 1, Charlotte Entrepreneurs is the lever for everything that I want to do. And 2, prioritization. I know exactly what steps I'm going to take. I'll give you a hint. The first one's the networking event. The second one's the educational workshops. And then the third thing is intentionality is so critical to these trips. Again, I encourage you to go back and watch that previous video so you can learn about solo trips, and encourage you to honestly try your own. Take a couple of days, go do one, go create some clarity in your life, because this one was so powerful for me and I'm so excited for the next steps. Stay tuned for next week's. Like the video if this was helpful to you. Subscribe so you can see when the next one comes out, and I will see you next week.